Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We're really excited that you're able to join us for our third election video in our series, Election 2020. This is our Get Out the Vote webinar, which is GOTV, how your organization can get involved with empowering individuals who are experiencing homelessness to vote this election. So thank you so much for joining us. I am Laurel Birchfield. I'm with the Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness. I'm joined by an excellent panel today. I'm very excited by the folks who will be sharing their information with you and talk to you about how you can get involved. We are very fortunate to be funded by two fantastic funders, the National Low Income Housing Coalition through their Our Homes, Our Votes 2020 campaign, and our ACLU Michigan Election Protection. To get started, I just want to kind of speak a little bit about why the Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness and our partners are so passionate about speaking about the election this year and why we should get folks to register and then cast their ballot in November, and then thinking about future elections as well. So for those of you who are on the webinar with us today who are part of service providers, I'm primarily speaking to you today about how you can get your organization and agency involved in this. But if we have any folks who are currently experiencing homelessness or have experienced in the past, we're also speaking to you today because you also play a critical role in helping people feel like they are part of this process and seeing the value of casting their vote. So let's talk a little bit about why you should get involved. We are just days away from the 2020 election, and it is a once in a generation election. So it's very important that we're talking about this with all of our Michigan residents and everybody who is registered and able to register to vote. So here at the Coalition Against Homelessness, we believe that voting is a right and everyone should feel as though their vote does count. And that process begins with you. Voting is also a racial justice issue. Registering and educating people experiencing homelessness about voting and the voting process is a way to reduce racial disparities. We're also really fortunate this year that in Michigan, we have a couple new opportunities that make registering to vote and then casting your ballot a lot easier, which, as we've already experienced, is incredibly important this year as we're dealing with the COVID pandemic and other issues that are affecting the way that we're voting this year. So now in Michigan, we have automatic voter registration, which means that once someone gets their ID, they're automatically registered to vote, which just eliminates an additional barrier, especially for our folks who are experiencing homelessness. We're also able to cast absentee or mail-in ballots without any reason, which means that everybody can request and submit an absentee ballot. Now, one of our speakers later on is, I'm hoping, going to speak a little bit about our timeline and how we can be participating right now. Absentee ballots are something that we can drop off in person at our local clerk's office or at a drop box. But at this point in the election cycle, we're recommending that people do not mail in their ballots. We want to make sure that as we're empowering people to get involved in this process, we're also giving them the best information that we can about how to participate. And at this point, we're encouraging folks not to mail in their ballots just because of timing, because we're so close to the election. Finally, and this is the most important thing that we want people to hear during this webinar and to be processing as you think about how to get involved, we have registration that can be happening up until and including election day. This is the first major election where we can actually do that. Previously, everybody had to be registered in advance, but this year we're able to go to the clerk's office, register in person, and then even cast our ballot early at the same time. And one of our presenters later on is going to speak about how they're doing that in their community and the impact that's had with their guests. And all of this is just creating new paths for participation, which, as I said, is making this a little bit easier for us to get involved in as service providers and as individuals who are empowering others to cast their ballot this year. And then finally, at MICA, we really believe that advocacy is key to making sure that we are doing everything we can to prevent and end homelessness in our state. And that means that we need to get people involved at the local level to talk to their elected officials. Our candidates listen to their constituents. When I call an elected official, whether that's at the local, state, or federal level, they always ask me where I live because they want to hear from people who live in their district, who vote for them or don't vote for them. And that's why we need to elevate your voice. And we need to do that now. We need you to engage now so that after the election, we have elected officials who prioritize housing and homelessness, and we can come back to them and hold them accountable. We're building those relationships right now, and it's so important that we get involved during this during this election process. Now I have a couple items that I want to share with you. These are things that we hope are conversation starters and information for you. Uh, these are 11 by 17 posters that we have available for you to be able to put up in your facilities. I have a link, and I should have said this at the very beginning of the webinar, I apologize, but we have a couple items that are available to download through our GoToWebinar platform. If you are using a computer, you should have a dashboard where you can see downloads. This presentation is something that you can download as a PDF, and you can then access this URL via that PDF rather than what you're seeing on the screen. But if you go to this URL, you should be able to request posters, and we'll put them in the mail immediately and get them to your facilities. We also have them available for you to be able to download in 8.5 by 11, and I'll make sure that you have access to that information after this webinar as well. And finally, we're also working on building trusted messengers through our program. We believe that as individuals are talking about how to cast their ballot, perhaps for the very first time in our state, we really want them to hear from people who are part of the process and walking similar paths. Our final presenter today is actually going to be part of our Peer Ambassador program and going to speak to you about his experience and how he's been able to help with programming in his location. And so I'm hoping that as people are listening to this webinar, they're considering folks who they know who might be interested in sharing their story about why they're voting this year and why they think others should be voting too. So we are inviting people to participate in our Peer Ambassador video program. I have links that are again on that PDF that will take you to our playlist of videos that we've already received, and then additional information about how you can participate. Now I am going to pause for just a second because I would like to take just a moment to share a video with all of you. And let me pull that up. If after all of that, you're still asking yourself, why should I be participating? What value or benefit is there in helping to empower folks to register to vote and then cast their ballots? I'm hoping this video will answer that final question for you. So we're going to take just about 6 minutes before we get to our presenters to watch this video. Thank you.
We're at Hope Shelters here, just getting folks registered to vote, making sure people are registered at the address that they want to be registered at, that they live at, and making sure that people know that they can register by mail, and just kind of like answering any questions that they might have. People experiencing homelessness, those are often the people who don't go vote, because a lot of people don't think you can vote if you don't have a permanent address or you don't live somewhere. You can actually register to vote at a street corner if you want to. Like in society in general, like we have a lot of weird feelings around folks who are experiencing homelessness or like homelessness in general. And a lot of like the jobs available are like service and labor jobs. And that doesn't always work with folks who have kids who can't work 40 hours a week or who are older and things like that.
I'm currently homeless. I don't have a residence, really. I'd work different jobs that required me to work crazy hours and sometimes doubles. I couldn't make it to the poll and didn't file for absentee ballot.
I haven't never voted by mail before. If I get a chance this year, I will. Certainly will. Sometimes I don't have a ride to get there. In Flint, they have rides you can get there, you know, but I'm not in Flint right now. So if I had a ride to get there, I will go all the time.
After ignoring how important the process is, I see now that the wrong people get in control of the country. It can be really detrimental to people's voice who need to be heard, like homeless or people who need help. You know, if we don't vote, we're not going to be represented. If we're not represented, our needs aren't going to be taken care of. Only a small percentage of people's needs will be taken care of.
We are a nonprofit community development corporation. We specialize in the development of affordable housing, and we also provide services to vulnerable populations. Empowered and engaged residents means a better community for all of us. And that can range from the simple, let's go out and do a cleanup, to really making the phone calls and writing the letters to folks that are elected officials. And if we don't do our part to empower people, then we're perpetuating the cycle and we're perpetuating homelessness. So voting is one of those tools that's in the arsenal, but being able to be a responsible citizen and know that your voice matters and that your voice counts, I think is critically important to positioning people for a better life.
Like, I got to the point, especially when I was home, like, why? People talk a good talk. People say, oh, we gonna do this for the community. They reaches out for the homeless when it's election time, when they time to do that. But then when they get in, everything changes. So people look at now, why vote? And the people that's homeless, they not just the dirty people like that, no. Majority that's homeless just want a second chance.
I think a lot of people who were formerly homeless, they don't trust the system because the system has not done well for them or has been a barrier and not a help to them. And so once you can get them past that, thinking that it's a negative thing and that voting for them is something that they can do for themselves and for their community, I think it then becomes easier.
I would say to the person that's homeless, that's thinking about not voting, I would say that I'm sorry that you haven't been treated with value and people don't treat you as though you have dignity. And I would say that you're valuable more than what you realize. Your voice does matter. One thing they can't take away from you is your actual vote. So if you lost a home, if you lost a car, it doesn't matter what you lost. You can always go to a poll and vote, and that's something that people can't take away. Continue to strive, continue to use that to the best of your ability, because if you don't impact your environment with your vote, as you see, the environment will continue to impact you.
I think that the act of just like casting your vote and letting your voice be heard in kind of the time that we're now is a very powerful point in a time where we're seeing so much injustice for all different kinds of communities, and like the least that we could do is cast a vote that could protect our communities and protect each other and uplift each other, and I think that this election will really like tell us kind of like where we're going for the future.
So thank you everyone for watching that video. I hope that that inspires you to participate in the little bit of time that we have left before the election, and that our next presenters encourage you to think about very practical ways that you can be involved in that process. So over the next couple of presenters, I want to let you all know that we are able to take questions. This is a small group, so if you have any questions, please send them in at any time using the chat or the question box, and we're happy to pause and answer those for you. I know we have a lot of really good information that we're going to be presenting. So I am going to go ahead and turn it over to our next presenter, who is Bilal Hamoud. Let's make sure that we can change our presenter so that you can see his screen. Bilal, are you ready for us?
I'm ready when you are.
Excellent. Let me go ahead and give you the power and let you introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bilal Hamoud. I am the Public Engagement Associate with the Department of State, and I'm really excited to be able to talk to you about some of the new rights that exist when it comes to voting, but also the kind of expansion of accessibility that has hit this state. One of the coolest things about Michigan is that it's gone from one of the worst states in terms of voting rights to one of the best. So I'm really excited to be able to share some of these resources and really highlight what you have as a right as an individual who may be facing homelessness, as someone who may not reside within a traditional home but at a shelter or at a church. So I'm really excited to be able to share this info, and I think my screen is shared, so I can get started. Is my screen shared?
I can see it, but I'm seeing some folks say they can't. Let's go ahead and keep moving, and we'll see if other people are also having trouble seeing your screen. But I can see it.
Okay. Well, so knowing your voting rights, the first thing you want to know is that voting rights differ from state to state, and that if you're looking to vote here in Michigan, if you want to register to vote here in Michigan, you want to make sure that you're looking at the Michigan rights. Now, one of the big things that I have to push, and it's relevant now more than ever, it's that you're getting your information from an accurate source. You're going to see a lot of things on media, on social media, and you're going to hear a lot of, I heard this, I heard that. And it's all going to be to distract you. The goal of a lot of these media campaigns and a lot of this noise you're hearing is really to overwhelm and distract. So I want to just preface by saying, use the information that you get from reputable sources and don't let the onslaught of things you're going to hear distract you from the fact that voting is your right. You have a right to do this, and that it is now easier more than ever. So one thing I'll say is know that the Secretary of State's office, the organizations that helped made this possible, made this webinar possible, are all reputable sources of information that are always receiving their information from an accurate source and trying to make sure that you have the most accurate and consistent information. So look towards them, look towards us for that voter information. Now, we can't talk about the voting process and what it's like to vote without talking about registering first. So the first question you ask is, are you registered to vote? Well, you can check by going online at michigan.gov/vote. And when it's 2 weeks within the election day, you can still register to vote up until election day itself in person at your clerk's office. Now, because of the way our systems work, you will need to provide a proof of residency here in Michigan, but that does take on forms that you might not expect. Now, proof of residency is a document with your name on it that and current address in the city or township and where you reside. So these are required when applying for a state ID card. A paper or electronic copy of that will suffice. So when you go into your clerk's office, you want to bring one of these. But one thing that I want to note is that a letter from a shelter or church is a sufficient proof of paperwork for your proof of residency. So you can use a Michigan driver's license or state ID card, a utility bill, bank statement, paycheck, government check, or some government document with your name on it. Or in the case of a shelter or church, they can provide documentation with your name on it. Now, this must come from the shelter or church on a official letterhead, should they have it, and make sure that it includes your name or the name of the individual who's applying, and just confirmation that they live there or that they spend time there and can receive mail there. And then depending on what municipality you're in, the clerk may want to follow up with someone who is there just to confirm this. So include some contact information just to be safe so that the clerk can follow up if need be. If you have intake paperwork for shelter, that also can be helpful if you're bringing that to clerk's office in order to register. And we've heard some comments that within the 2 weeks before the election, these requirements change. That is not the case. That still serves as proof of residency within the 14 days leading up to an election, because the applicant still has to go in person to the clerk's office to register. So I wanted to clarify that because there's been a lot of misconceptions around this, and this is something that is one of the most critical aspects of participating in the election if someone is housing insecure. So really make sure that that is resonating in your mind at all times, because you can use a shelter or a church, a letter from them as a form of proof of residency. Now, once you decide that, hey, I do want to vote, I want to participate, I want my voice to be heard, I want to bring power to my community, you can take your voter registration and do a couple things with it. You can apply for an absentee ballot, but now that we're really approaching the election deadline, I want to encourage everyone to go to your clerk's office, because you have the opportunity to vote in person at your clerk's office 40 days before the election. So you can just walk in, register to vote, and vote all there at the same time. You don't have to go to the clerk's office, or so you don't have to go to your polling location on the day of election. You don't have to mail in anything. You can just go into your clerk's office and do it there. So take advantage of that opportunity. If you did receive an absentee ballot, you can still drop it off at your clerk's office until 8 p.m. on election day, or return it to a local drop box. If you go to michigan.gov/vote, all that information and more will be available to you. Now, you can still technically mail in your ballot back, but as we've passed the 14-week window, our office is recommending that you drop it off just to be safe and make sure that your ballot is received. So what if you moved and you need to update your voter registration record? How do you do that? Well, whenever you move to a new city or township, you must re-register to vote. And if you move within a city or township, you'll need to update your address. And that can be completed online at expresssos.com. It's a very quick process. You can also go to your local clerk's office or Secretary of State branch or by mail. But for the purposes of what's happening now, Michigan voters must use the same residential address for voter registration and driver's license purposes. So if you do change your address on your driver's license, it will also update your address on your voter registration. And the vice versa is true. If you submit a voter registration address change, it will be applied to your driver's license, and wherever you sign up to receive mail, you'll receive an updated sticker with your new address that you've listed. So just be aware of that when you are updating your voter registration record if you're moving from town to town. Now, voting in person is still a full possibility. Like I said, you can vote within 40 days of the election at the clerk's office. You can also vote at the polling location that you are registered to on election day. Now that's open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And if you're in line by 8 p.m., you are allowed to vote. So even if the lines are long and it's 8:05, as long as you are in line by 8, you can still vote. Now, I also recommend that you double check before you check, which means if you're gonna go vote, make sure you know where the polling location is. You can look up your voter information at michigan.gov/vote, check where your polling location is, and find out where it's going to be on the day of election, so you can go to the right place. And should you decide to go to your clerk's office, you can find that information as well. Now, once again, there are tons of resources available to you. Michigan.gov/SOS language access is translated voter guides, voter registration forms, sample ballots, absentee ballot applications, and more, all within 10 different languages from across the state. Michigan.gov/vote also has the tools necessary for you to check your registration, register to vote online, request to vote by mail, find your clerk's office, find your polling place, and preview your ballot, as well as track your ballot if you've already sent it in. Now, again, I want to preface and say the deadline for registering to vote online has passed. So if you want to register to vote, you can still go to your clerk's office and do that. There's also these assistant hotlines in different languages that are available. And the one thing I really do want to highlight is the 866 Our Vote Election Protection Hotline. It is a line dedicated to making sure that you are given your right to vote and that no one is disenfranchised. We're working closely with this team to ensure that everyone who wants to vote, who has the right to vote, is able to do so. So if you think someone is being turned away, if you're worried that someone is wrongfully being turned away or being disenfranchised, or that there's voter suppression or intimidation happening, call this line. This is the go-to source for election protection. And that's it. I want to say, once again, exercise your voice. It is your right. It is something you're given as a citizen of this country. Take advantage of that, because it's the only way you'll bring power to your community. Thank you for your time, and I'll pass it back to Laurel.
Thank you. And thank you for that really important information. I think that that is really good for all of us to hear and to process as we're thinking about how we can get involved with our work. And I apologize, I'm doing that tricky thing where I'm trying to also now share my screen. So give me just a moment as I try to get this set up while I'm speaking with all of you. But I just want to check in, does anybody have any questions for Bilal? I know he talked a lot about address. I know that our folks also experience difficulties with IDs. Want to stress again that you do not need an ID to either register to vote or to cast your ballot. But I just want to pause, make sure everybody knows that we are taking questions through the question box and that Bilal will be here for the rest of the webinar if anybody would like to ask a question. These are kind of the logistics that help us think through how we can do more work and support our folks to get out the vote for election. Not seeing any questions, I am going to go ahead and move on. Our next presenters, I'm really excited about the program that they're running, and I'm really excited that they're here to share this with us. So Essence and Lori are with Communities First over in Flint, and I am going to share their presentation, but I'm going to go off camera so that you guys can see them. And are you guys ready, Essence and Lori, to present?
We are ready.
Excellent. Take it away.
All right. Well, great. Thank you for the opportunity to present, and thank you to everyone who is listening and watching and has interest in this important work. So I also want to say thank you to Bilal for being a great resource during this whole thing, and our engagement with the Secretary of State's office through him goes back to the beginning of the year when we first started talking about possibilities on what we could do. And then to have this opportunity through the Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness has just really allowed us to accelerate our work regarding civic engagement. So I'll start by just sharing that the mission of our organization is to build healthy, vibrant communities through economic development, affordable housing, and innovative programming. And so our work is really organized in three important ways. They are equitable real estate development, economic mobility, and engaged communities. So when we think about that, the engaged communities piece of our work is where this sort of civic engagement lies. And so that was a shift that we saw coming for a long time for our organization, and this program allowed us to, again, like I said, do more quicker in that regard. So we can go on to the next slide. And what we realized when we first started this conversation was that there are many, many barriers to those that are housing insecure when it comes to voting. Some of these we realized well in advance, and then there were a couple of things that we noticed and became aware of as we were doing this work. So obviously transportation is a barrier. Not having an address to be registered at, being able to actually provide that proof of residency, state ID or a driver's license. And then the last ones we became aware of, like I said, as we were doing this work, mental health issues that people might be experiencing, where the stress and anxiety of voting, it may just be a little bit too much. And so we were talking about this as we were debriefing the other day about, the idea that your voice matters is really important. And I think that resonates with a lot of people. But think about the weightiness of that, right? If your voice matters, then it means who you vote for matters. And, usually elections aren't decided by one vote, but that can be a lot for a person to bear when they think about the power of their own voice, especially if they haven't felt like they had a voice in the past. So we are very sensitive to that. Some people don't feel like it's important to vote. Others might feel like their voice doesn't matter. So again, that contrast between us saying, yes, your vote matters, your voice matters, you should vote, and then, the flip side of that of, not maybe feeling that in other areas of their life. Some people have had previous bad experiences where they've been either turned away or given wrong information or haven't had the proper documentation. And then just generally speaking, a lack of information. So what we recognize is that there is a need for us to continue to do this work beyond just this effort, beyond November 3rd, because when it comes time for the next election, we want people to be informed, we want them to be empowered, we want them to be ready to exercise their right. So I'm going to have Lori speak on the next couple of slides that we have. So I'm going to stop sharing my webcam and I'm going to mute myself.
Okay. We can go on to the next slide. All right, so basically we taking into consideration all of the barriers that this population does have when they are trying to vote, we looked at how to remove those barriers. So we thought about transportation and we thought about the anxiety or the fear of actually going to a city office or building, city hall even. So we decided that we would provide transportation, but before we did that, we did sit down with the shelter leaders and other other providers in the area to provide training to them, because we found there are a lot of myths that were that preceded this situation. So we did a training that provided education for those service providers, so they would be better equipped to answer any questions that their residents or their clients may have. By partnering with the shelters, we were able to arrange transportation where we would go pick up the residents that wanted to go vote, actually talk to those ones that were concerned about not participating in the process. Through that, we used our peer ambassador to kind of be able to relate with those folks to make sure that they understood that we would be there with them the whole way. So arranging the transportation to the clerk's office was key because we wanted to get them there without any incident. But prior to that, we sat down and had and built a rapport and a partnership with the clerk's office, letting them know what we were trying to do. They were very excited, very open about the situation, and they were welcoming to those folks that we were able to bring over. And then providing any key information, so letting them know before they got on the bus what they needed to have, what was going to happen, giving them an expectation, kind of helped ease some of the anxiety that would be there normally. And our peer ambassador was awesome because he was someone that had been in their shoes, so he was able to really speak from a point of empathy about the situation. And he himself had gone through the process as a part of our ramp up to this point. I mean, then we, with the relationship that we built with the city clerk's office, we're now able to look at what this looks like next year and the year after, being able to do follow-up, being able to, ignite people on their civic engagement options and why, even though they feel like they are the forgotten population, that they're not. You're able to go to the next slide. So we engaged 7 shelters in the city of Flint. Of the 7, we were able to build a relationship and have pickup locations at 4 of them. The engagement was a little bit slower than what we anticipated, but we were able to answer a lot of questions. We are also engaged with the continuum of care, and we had a total of 85 clients that were registered. And we've successfully facilitated voting for 10 people within this first week. Thank you.
All right, so going on to our next slide, and just so that you understand, really what we were able to do, we wanted to remove as many barriers as we possibly could. So the idea of what information and documentation do you have to have? Am I registered or not registered? Where do I submit my voter absentee ballot? All of those things were rectified for us by taking people directly to the clerk's office where they could do all of those things all at the same time. And the clerk's office for us was the most knowledgeable entity in our community that could advise, or if something came up, they knew exactly who to call. And we are just so thankful and so fortunate that we have Clerk Arnez Brown, who really wants to see people, exercise their right to vote. And what she did was basically notified her team how many people were coming, when they were coming, and they were ready for us, which is amazing. The transportation was timely, so we're thankful to the Mass Transportation Authority, MTA here locally, they made it happen for us and with us. So in this process, we had to be really creative and flexible. So we had our peer ambassador test the process. And then, so he walked through, making sure that he was registered to vote, and then actually voting in advance of us taking people over. So then he was able to actually offer feedback to the clerk's office to improve the process and let us know, about how long does it take? Are there any roadblocks or barriers that people might face, and where might people, become frustrated? What we did also notice was that longer wait times became much shorter as, the clerk's office understood what we were doing and knew, what kind of paperwork was going to be received. We had shelters that did provide that letter that says this is the address for that person, and it was received and accepted without a problem. But as a result of that, we also adjusted our transportation schedule. We were initially operating off of the peer ambassadors experience, where it was, about 25 minutes to walk through the process. And then they were able to get that down to, like 15 minutes or so with the next trip. So we had to adjust the transportation schedule. And then, of course, as we expected to some extent, the number of people who registered and who we thought would be participating didn't quite match the actual number of participants. So we have increased our outreach and also adjusted our plans to do some other kind of creative outreach. So here in Flint, a lot of people who are experiencing housing insecurity or homelessness congregate in the downtown area. So we have a flyer that'll go out hopefully tomorrow that will basically go out to the continuum of care and say, if you have somebody who wants to vote, but they're not 100% comfortable, one, if they are comfortable, here's the process, and this is how they can just go to the clerk's office, what to expect. If they're not comfortable, call this number, and our peer ambassador or one of our staff will meet them and help them walk through the process. So there will be a couple of spots that we'll go and actually meet people and walk with them over. And then there's also just, we'll meet you at the clerk's office, or someone will be available between 1 and 3. And really that's just about making people feel comfortable and letting them know that it is a safe space for them. So we kind of like guard people and say, we don't want them to have a bad experience while they're trying to vote. But here's an advocate for you, just in case you don't know who to contact, who to call, what questions to ask, that sort of thing. So we're just creating safe places, removing barriers, and advocating for anyone and everyone to vote, especially those that are experiencing housing insecurity. So thank you for the opportunity to present, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and Lori is as well.
Thank you so much. And we did get a question. I think this one might actually be better answered by Bilal. Let me see if I can pull this up. And this is, I think, fairly recent news. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit reinstated a ban on providing transportation for voting. Is that just if it is paid transportation? Our organization was looking to provide a shuttle to take folks to the city clerk's office, but volunteers aren't incredibly clear on the regulations. Thank you so much. Bilal, is this something that you could speak to?
To be honest, this just came up in our radar maybe an hour or two ago, as the ruling had just happened. And so we're still trying to figure out what this means for the different varieties of transportation. So I really don't have an answer, unfortunately, at this time.
Okay, and I thank you for asking the question. As soon as it came in, I started digging through my email because I know I've been seeing some updates about that, but I know that's fairly recent about the reinstatement. And so I am seeing some emails coming out saying that people are pausing in their transportation. So that's just something for us to all be aware of as we're thinking through how we can get involved and tackling that critical question about transportation barriers. We will continue to look into this for you. And Bilal, I'm hoping that you can partner with us to make sure we get an official answer that we can send out to this group after the webinar and after the Department of State has been able to kind of put together their response to that. So thank you for the question. Lori, in essence, you mentioned your peer ambassador a couple of times, so I think this question is a result of that, wanting to know how someone can get involved in the program as a peer ambassador. So I'll go ahead and answer that one. The peer ambassadors that Lori and Essence were speaking about is someone who's identified through a grant opportunity specific for their location. And so that's how their peer ambassador was able to participate in their process. And I'm so glad to hear that it is going well and that he is engaging at such a fantastic level with their programming. But the Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness also has the opportunity for peer ambassadors to submit videos. And it's a slightly different program. It is just video-based versus some of the on-the-ground work that Lori and Essence were speaking about. But I am happy to connect with you offline to talk to you about how you may be able to get involved, or others may get involved with our peer ambassador video program. Unfortunately, we don't have the funding or resources to build up peer ambassadors quite at the level of what Lori and Essence were speaking about. But thank you for the question, and I'm happy to connect with you afterwards about our video program. All right, so I'm not seeing any other questions coming in at this time. Essence and Lori, thank you so much for that fantastic presentation and for sharing all of the information about what you're doing. I just kind of went quickly past the question about transportation. Did either of you have anything?
I would like to come back to it if possible.
Please do.
So just to put some clarifying notes, we do know that this is only relevant to paid transportation. So if this is someone renting out a bus to bring someone to the polls, which we have seen done in the past, that is what this ruling is saying, at least for now. If it's a volunteer-based system where no finances are being exchanged, that is still allowed. So the program that you were running with Communities First and MTA, that is still okay.
And so it seems like some of the other programs that some of our organizations may be interested in doing through a volunteer basis may also still be okay under this ruling. Is that kind of what I'm hearing from you right now, Bilal?
Yes.
Wonderful. So hopefully that calms some of our concerns, and we can keep you updated if anything changes or if there's any different guidance that comes out. We do have a follow-up question. What about bus passes to vote?
You know, I just gave you as much info as I could, and then you hit me with that niche question. I will have to get back to you on that one.
I've got another one for you. What about church buses? I think that we'll have to come back to you guys.
I think church buses are not a paid service, like they're owned by the church and they want to take people out. That is allowed. If there's any sort of payment, then I have to get back to you on it.
All right. Well, thank you. We're sorry to put you on the spot, but I think that this obviously
good questions.
Yes, a timely and important question for us to be thinking about. So if you guys have additional scenarios around transportation that you need guidance on, go ahead and send them in. We probably won't be able to answer them live on this webinar, but we will look into it for you and get back to you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next and final presenters. I'm really excited to have Olivia and Raymond on from Community Action House. And I'm going to start with Olivia to tell us a little bit about the program, and then we're going to hear from another peer ambassador. Olivia, are you able to speak with us now?
Yeah, you should be able to hear me, hopefully see me soon.
We can hear you just fine at least.
Awesome. It looks like my webcam has started on my side, but maybe not everybody else's. So I'll just start. If you can see me, that's great. If not, sorry. So I'm Olivia. I am from the Community Action House. We are located in Holland, Michigan. Here at the Community Action House, our mission is to end poverty in our community and help families prosper. We do that in a few different ways. We do it through food assistance, through our food pantry, foreclosure intervention, and then also through outreach. Our outreach has two primary programs, one of which is our Refresh Hygiene program, as well as our community kitchen. One of the main reasons we got involved with the voter initiative was to help our people who are experiencing housing insecurities and homeless guests learn that their voice is equal, that it matters, and that their voice can drive change. And as many of you know, the homeless population traditionally has less of a voice in the election. This can be due to increases in environmental barriers, lack of education and knowledge, limited encouragement from others, and honestly, a deep-rooted belief that their voice doesn't matter. This deep rooted belief is something that both Raymond, our peer ambassador, who you will hear a little bit about from later, and I have seen so much. Some of the things that we've heard include, I'm a felon, I can't vote, my vote doesn't matter. Why would anyone care if I voted? The government doesn't care about me. The system is out to get me. Even if I did vote, it wouldn't matter. Many of these people are older. They've never been empowered to vote, to have a voice, been told that they matter, or even been told that they can help make a change. I know that this sounds kind of doomsday and it's frustrating, but the reality is we're all taking steps and there's light. Although this is an uphill battle, there are things and conversations that we can have with our guests that can change those core beliefs. One of the biggest things that we have found are through conversations that we have intentionally with our guests. One of the biggest ones is educate. We spend a lot of time educating our guests who are experiencing housing insecurities and homelessness about the knowledge and how to even register to vote. A lot of our guests need to know that they can vote without an ID, that they can vote using a street corner, a park, a shelter, their mailing address, as long as it's a residential. There's a lot of different things that have been barriers that they believe allow them to not be able to vote, but with the correct education, they can. This education will take time. It might start with just us asking the question, why don't you vote? What are some of those barriers? Leaning into that curiosity component gives them power, but also educates us on how we can form our conversation, and also educate them maybe in the future, or even during that conversation. Once you educate, you have to prove to them that they value. You need to know their name. You need to know what they said, what they worry about, what are their concerns. Maybe talking to them twice that week about those things, or remembering that the hurt they shared or the fear that they shared surrounding the government or the system that's in place. Showing them that they matter is one step closer to them believing that their vote will actually matter. One of the last things that we have done in our conversations with our guests is shown them time. This is a big one and a hard one. First, it's giving of our own personal time. So many of our guests are afraid of voting. It's a scary thing. It's stressful. And when you are in a situation where you are so focused on where are you getting your next meal, where are you sleeping, how are you going to make your tent warm, how are you going to pin down your tarp, those things don't allow your brain to have any extra space to be able to have time for one new thing that's scary, voting. If we can be part of that part of their brain that they don't have time for, we can help them in this process. So we can help them walk to the city hall, to the city clerk. You can read their documents for them. You can help walk them through the documents. These are all things that help lessen that burden. Even just standing there saying, hey, you've got this. Like, this is confusing. I totally understand. What can I do to help? Allows them to not be so stressed and not worried. The other part of time is, it's honestly just time for the conversations to sink in. We are working to change a core belief that has been around for a long time. We are working to plant a seed that might not take roots or have fruit for several years. So we have to work and have knowledge that our conversation needs to continue much past the election. It needs to continue throughout the year, throughout the following year, and into the next election. It's going to be an ongoing challenge. It's a conversation that could eventually lead to somebody feeling like they're empowered, somebody feeling like they have a voice, that they have power and autonomy in their own life, and that's pretty cool. Raymond, as I mentioned earlier, is our peer ambassador. He has had numerous conversations with our guests, and I would love to give him a few minutes to tell you about his personal experience and how he's been engaging in conversations.
Raymond, I believe you're still muted if you're trying to speak. Raymond, are you with us? Okay. It sounds like we might be having some technical difficulties. Olivia, are you still with us?
Yep, I'm still here.
Okay. Have you heard from Raymond? Is he having any troubles?
I have not personally. I'm quick making sure we don't have any messages, but.
While we're trying to get Raymond's microphone to work, let me see. It looks like we had another question come in. All right, we're gonna pause on Raymond's presentation to answer this question really quick. And Bilal, this one is probably for you again. If someone were to use a park or a street corner as their address, what does that process look like?
So for registering to vote, on the voter registration form, there's a section for where you can put your address down. That is where you would put down the corner or street corner or park in which you want to have as your address. Now, I would say that if you have the option to choose between the two, a park or a street corner, or a place that can receive mail, I always preface the one that can receive mail, but it is not a necessity. This is just for your own personal convenience. A street corner just goes on the voter registration form itself under the address section.
I'm going to chime in here as not an expert on this process. Bilal is definitely able to speak from a place of knowledge that I don't have. But we have heard from some of our programs that there's been some confusion about registering to vote using non-traditional addresses. And so one thing that we've learned through this process is that as you are discovering ways that you can empower folks to register to vote, as you're talking to your guests and your clients and building that relationship and using all of the great techniques that Olivia has shared with us, a similar process needs to be happening at the same time. And that is building a relationship and trust and everything that goes along with that with your local clerk. Because when you are registering someone to vote with a non-traditional address, you may need to educate your clerk about how that can be received and how that is an appropriate and correct way for us to be registering folks. And that's something that, again, takes time. We're planting seeds right now, but that is definitely a worthwhile and essential part of this process. So contact your clerk's office, have conversations, go in and talk in person, see how you guys can work together to get folks registered and make sure that they understand how you can use these non-traditional addresses so that they don't deny applications, they don't have any concerns and push back as you're actually bringing folks in to register. Well, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add to that.
Nope, you said it perfectly. Thank you, Laurel.
Thank you. And I'm not seeing any other questions at this time, so let's check back in. Olivia or Raymond, did we get things sorted out?
Yeah, I guess I was muted. I did not recognize that. But I'd just like to say that my name is Raymond. I'm one of the new peer ambassadors here in Holland. I just first want to start off by saying that I really appreciate this position, being able to kind of reach out and kind of see different voters' point of view on things. It's been pretty interesting learning people that have survived homelessness and people that are still dealing with it. I always try to interact with them kind of on a first person basis rather than coming out and just asking them if they're registered or not. Because a lot of people come from different walks of life, and I really feel that there's been a lot of people that I've spoke to that have just either turned away or have the misconception that if they have a felony or if they're don't have a permanent residence, that they're unable to vote, and there's just a lot of misconception with that. And I think it's very important that they get their voice out there, because if one person can make a huge difference, or if one person just doesn't want to vote, maybe we can change their mind and get them to at least say, hey, you know, I might like some different fruit on the table. And maybe those little pushes are what people need to be inspired to get their voice out there as well. I think it's pretty important, and I really feel thankful, and I hold a lot of respect for you guys to allow me this opportunity to be a part of this.
Well, thank you, Raymond. Thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for everything you're doing. I think that it's fairly obvious from all of our perspectives that you and your other peer ambassadors are the ones doing the real work out there and building that trust and building those relationships. So thank you for all that you're doing, and I hope that your experience may inspire others to empower individuals who are seeking services and seeking shelter to have some conversations in their own spaces and with their own peers about what voting could look like and why we should be empowering folks to vote. So thank you.
I really appreciate it. You're very welcome.
And Olivia, thank you so much for your wisdom. I know that you shared some wonderful stories with us, some heartbreaking stories from some of the folks who you've had conversations with, you and Raymond, and some of their reasons for why they don't feel like they should be or could be participating in the election. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Keep it up. We still have a couple days before the election to still change some hearts and minds and get people to cast their ballot. So that is the end of our presentation. We have just a few more minutes. I think we've answered all the questions that have come in, but I want to make sure that if there's anything else that's pressing, if people want to ask Bilal any more logistics questions about how to register or cast their ballot, or any of our panelists about their programming and their experiences, we do have a minute or two to do that. Go ahead and type in your question, and while you're doing that, I want to call your attention again to the handout section of your dashboard on GoToWebinar. Not only is the presentation that I shared available, but we also have 2 FAQ documents, one in English and one in Spanish, that answers a lot of questions that some of you may be asking about how we can register folks and help them cast their ballot this election and for future elections. You should be able to download those. But if you have any concerns or can't get those downloaded, I will be following up with all of these materials. In addition, we'll include Bilal's presentation as well. So you can have all of this information at your fingertips and can reference that as you're thinking about how to build up programming for this election, but for future elections as well. And I have not seen any more questions come in. So I would just like one more time to say thank you to all of our presenters. Your information is invaluable. Your experiences are so helpful as we're thinking about how we can do this work and carry it forward. I also want to share the contact information for myself and our team. We are, again, the Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness based in Lansing, but we work around the state and are very interested in speaking with anybody who would like to talk about how they can do get out the vote work for this election, and as I've been saying this whole webinar, future elections as well. So thank you again, Bilal, Essence, Lori, Olivia, and Raymond, for everything that you're doing. Thank you for everyone who attended. Feel free to reach out if you have additional questions, and good luck with any election work that you're doing. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you. You too.
Have a great day, everyone.
Goodbye.